Good morning. UNITAR is very proud to be here. I want to begin by thanking Professor Mancebo for his leadership and especially for his vision in hosting us for the second time at this Rencontres de Reims. UNITAR is here, as he mentioned, as a partner. We are very happy to see this coming to fruition. And today we are going to deliver two presentations in the following order as he had mentioned before. The first one will be my honor and is a little more informative than trying to entice thinking and discussion, but at the end I will make sure that I leave some ideas behind. And the second one by my colleague Elena Proden on the social contract is going to follow. But the two of us, in that sense, hope to complement by giving you a vision of UNITAR, by perhaps suggesting a model of capacity building, which is the one that we are using for the last 4 years already, and then moving on to something that is very relevant in this type of dialogues. So without further ado, let me go to my presentation if I can find it. Can you help me? Should be here. Should be, this is my last name. Right here, I found it. My apologies to you. Thank you. So, my name is Alex Mejia. I have the honor of the pleasure of managing the local development program of UNITAR, which is part of our governance unit. And today I am going to cover our vision on Rio+20 and local governments, the importance of capacity building and knowledge sharing. As I say at the beginning, sharing information on our activities, inviting you to join us, to partner with us, to give us ideas, to give us feedback, and then leaving behind some comments. We focus on, under the governance unit, on local development, public finance and trade, and international migration. UNITAR has quite a unique story. Some of you know, some of you don't, so please allow me to share some. We were created in 1965 at the General Assembly on the suggestion of some member states that the UN will have a specialized agency directly in charge of building capacity among government officials working at the UN. So it was a very humble and very specific origin, but one that has evolved from a little less than 1,000 participants at the very beginning out of New York, where our initial headquarters was, to, you'll see soon, 27,000 or so per year. We, in addition to governance, we also focus on the environment, on environmental governance and law, climate change, biodiversity, chemicals and waste management, monitoring and evaluation. We are very happy to share this with you after a short negotiation, more of a conversation yesterday. We are going to begin with the University of Reims delivering to deliver some content on this at the same time that they come and deliver content for the people that we train. And then we also have another unit, which is the peace, security and diplomacy that focuses on international law, peacemaking and conflict prevention, multilateral diplomacy and peacekeeping. I don't have a pointer, but if I could, these two words, multilateral diplomacy, are the core of our business. Everyone coming to work with the UN at the UN centers in New York, Geneva, Vienna, Nairobi, they go through UNITAR to get up to the speed, especially when they're beginners, or sometimes when they come back as well, in order to be able to join negotiations or dialogues or consultations and so on right there. And we are very pleased to do so. But the last word of this unit, the ones that cover peacekeeping, is perhaps what makes us more proud, if I use this word properly. We do train peacekeepers military officers and so on before deployment on sensitive issues related to international law, to rules of engagement, to cultural sensitivities before you send soldiers from a foreign nation into a difficult territory and so on. And at the core of what we do, our engagement with DPKO, the Department of Peacekeeping Operations, is perhaps what makes us more proud. And then we have the research side of UNITAR, which is the fourth unit. Some people know UNOSAT, the United Nations Organization on Satellites services. But some other people don't know that UNOSAT is part of UNITAR. UNOSAT takes satellite imagery, process it, and deliver it to governments or to the UN. For instance, when we are about to deploy a team on very short time frame for humanitarian intervention or due to natural disasters and so on. So UNOSAT and also the knowledge system innovation are focused on that. There you have a picture or multiple pictures of these 27,000+ beneficiaries that we have trained. This is the number for last year. With a very specific focus on Africa and Asia and the Pacific. Till 5 weeks ago, I had the privilege of being the head of our UNITAR Hiroshima office, which is the one that focuses on the Asia Pacific area. I was living in Hiroshima till mid-August. And I'm very happy to now be joining the headquarters in Geneva, but also very sad to depart from a region which is unique in its needs, but also unique in its strengths, in my humble opinion. I come from Latin America, and this South-South cooperation sometimes I tend to see on a very personal base, my persona. The privilege of engaging with people from far away from where I am and seeing how many similitudes we have, how priorities at the end of the day are the same wherever you go. Africa represents 1/3 of all training beneficiaries, as I say, 32%, and it is our main focus, and that will be strengthened. I mentioned yesterday during a comment that the executive director of UNITAR, many friends of Carlos here, Dr. Carlos Lopez, has been appointed by Secretary General Ban as the new executive secretary of ECA, the Economic Commission for Africa in Addis Ababa. He's already there, and he left, as I say, like a month ago or so, the two hats that he had, and you will see some synergies in what I'm going to say. He was at the same time the executive director of UNITAR and also of the UN Staff College in Torino. Now Carlos is moving on as an Undersecretary General, and there will be a new UNITAR executive director as of Monday next week in Geneva. That's an example of what UNOSAT is doing. If I can go back. That, for instance, is a picture, I'm sorry that the quality is not that good, of a flooding area. When we try to help people in distress, this is a concerted effort, and UNITAR is privileged to facilitate this in matters of hours, basically to guide people on the ground. But I also wanted to mention that we have this network of centers that belong to my program, 9 training centers around the world. I actually joined UNITAR managing the one in Atlanta in the US that trains Latin American officials in Spanish. The one in Curitiba trains Portuguese-speaking government officials from Brazil and the 5 Portuguese-speaking countries of West Africa. Anyway, here, just so you can have an idea of where we are about to open a new center in less than 2 months or so in Algiers. The issue of the Arab Spring led some governments to finally recognize the need to focus on youth And one of the ways to do so, on their request, several member states have requested UNITAR and other agencies to go and build capacity among youth. And we are very happy to do so. This is why we are going to open this center. The centers focus mainly on local communities. This is the particularity of the CIFAL network. There are many, many resources available for national governments, and a little less when you go to the local government level. In showing you this picture, I also want to make sure that I invite you to, as academicians, researchers, or specialists in any particular field, to visit these different websites or through the UNITAR website and tell us, because this is how we work, if there is something that you can contribute. Normally we cover expenses of experts that see how we can improve whatever program we are implementing for local governments. We have also regional offices in Hiroshima, Japan, where I was before, in Brasilia, Brazil, in New York, in the US, and these CIFAL centers that I say. Getting into more specificity, on the request of our Secretary General, there is a training service platform on climate change that was created a couple of years ago, UNCC Learn, that I would also like to invite you to visit, that has a particular focus on sustainability resources, sustainability studies as a whole, which is a point of coincidence with all of you, but also a lot of other pieces of information that perhaps are relevant, like reports, like videos, like e-learning courses, and on many, many topics. There you can see some. We have developed several courses, e-learning courses attached to this platform on green economy and environmental governance that are very successful. I'm very happy to share that unfortunately, we always have to cap them because there is a maximum capacity that if we want to implement the methodology correctly, has to be respected. I'm going to give you some examples of the UNITAR approach to environmental training and capacity development. Basically, we have a training link to environmental goals. We project objectives jointly established with the partner country. Some people ask me, how is it that UNITAR decides where to go? And remembering that we are a UN agency, we have to do this part. And there, I personally have a problem. And I would like to put it in personal terms, not as a UN situation, because it will be too delicate. When we have these dialogues with the partner country, with the member state, we do not include local actors, because we have to create this framework of reference as any UN agency. But then we try to complement that, unfortunately, on a non-official manner, under best offices approaches with local governments to try to create synergies between this national framework and the local needs. And I say this because that is one of the messages that I would like to leave behind. We at the UN, in my humble opinion, and I mentioned something like this yesterday, we need to evolve to recognize that the 21st century, as some people say, is the century of local governance. Local governance. National governance has evolved to a point in which it is no longer possible to control all the elements of governance. Most of them in the last decades have been, and I love this phrase that someone said yesterday, that, and I believe it was you, Professor, that if you want to, another one of your colleagues, if you want to have real control, lose it. If you want to involve people, lose the control. If you really want to bring everyone on board, lose control. This is why I'm mentioning this. Then normally we work on plans that are between 1 and 2 years in duration, country-driven, multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder processes. UNITAR provides process guidance and technical training, integral dimensions of capacity development process, and strengthening capacities of societal forces that foster environmental sustainability and justice. This is the part of the presentations that I don't like, the ones that I have to deliver, unfortunately, the ones that I just read to you. That really doesn't add, it doesn't add value, but bear with me, we'll get to the meat. Here are some examples from Indonesia, Mexico, and Kyrgyzstan that give you an idea of what is it that we do. The chemicals and waste management program is really important, strategic, and I believe to the point, delivering in countries like North Korea, where not many people entered to build capacity to help a government establish national guidelines and to actually implement processes that improve the environment. But we believe it's important because if I can tell you in a nutshell, the level of metal leakage to the stream flows, to the rivers, is really damaging. I've seen that with my own eyes, and countries like that, we believe really need these things. Then we focus also on adaptation. There you have examples from Mongolia, the Philippines, and Ghana. Then you have an environmental governance examples like an agreement reached among government sectors and stakeholders to strengthen access to environment information policies in Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic. A public participation section of the 2007 National Air Quality Management Framework in South Africa, and an international network of public participation researchers catalyzed in 2008 through the Unitarian Environmental Governance Conference that still is in place. Why do we have the CIFAL network? The vision is to do knowledge transfer for sustainable municipal development. Very specific. And if I can summarize all these 50 minutes that I have been given, this is the message that I would like to leave behind. That UNITAR has this uniqueness, among all the other things that we do, that we really want to expand. Because as I say, environmental governance and any environmental effort must include local governments. And to ensure that they are up to the task, capacity development is crucial. The mandate of UNITAR CIFAL network is to facilitate measurable, knowledgeable, and skills transfer for more effective sustainable development, as I say. 14,761 beneficiaries in the last biennium through activities in 68 countries. Professor Mancebo mentioned correctly that in addition to give this information to you and invite you to join us and so on in this effort, we also establish linkages, and that is why the title of my presentation is like that, Rio+20 and local governments, between what the mandate says, this is how we understood his kind invitation, and what we need to do. So allow me to read. As a global network of local hubs for knowledge sharing and capacity building, CIFALs are supporting Rio+20 outcome recommendations that urge governments and organizations. You can say that from whatever you are doing, if you are involved with local government, because these are the three, unfortunately only three, specific comments in the outcome document. First, to encourage action at the regional, national, subnational, and local levels to promote access to information, public participation, and access to justice in environmental matters. Second, to support the need for more coherent and integrated planning and decision-making at the national, subnational, and local levels. Last but not least, to encourage public and private initiative, including at the local level, to foster a dynamic and well-functioning business sector and to facilitate entrepreneurship and innovation, including among women, the poor, and the vulnerable. We were expecting a lot more from Rio+20 towards local governments, but still, of course, unbiased, I believe that even in light of the shortcomings of Rio+20, we did achieve to raise awareness. We did achieve to, at least in pledges, fundraise to the level that we needed for the next decade. And some of these pledges, by the way, are coming in an impressive number of millions of dollars. But yes, we also did fail to focus on climate change for political reasons mentioned yesterday correctly by the first speaker, and on many other things. But that is the reality of politics, and that is the reality of the multilateral framework. Some people forget that the UN is just an intergovernmental organization. We are not a government. And we don't have the mandate of imposing anything on governments, on the contrary. So we can go as long, as much, as far as the member states want to go. This is just an idea of the specificity of the training that we do. We do awareness raising campaigns. I'm going to show you the Green Dreams campaign that has been very successful. That was part of Rio+20. Conferences, forums that we organize or that we participate in. And this is the core of what we do, these two things. Workshops, seminars, fellowships, e-learning courses, and so on. One of the things that I'm going to miss the most, just to give you an example of this part, of this word, fellowships, is the fellowships for Iraq and Afghanistan that UNITAR has been doing for a number of years, in which we actually go to these countries and we build capacity for 7 or 8 months every year, 1 week per year, with people from national ministries and other organizations on how to become better decision makers, on how to focus on planning, how to better understand public policy, how to increase governance, and so on and so forth. In the case of Baghdad, the things that we do are focused now on post-conflict reconstruction. In the case of Kabul, the things that we do are focused still on transition from national governance with a vision exclusively on the capital, which is a big mistake, to the subnational governance. And we are trying to do that. We are in the 10th fellowship. This is the 10th year that we are doing it. And I'm going to miss, as I say, working with Afghans and Iraqis, because I believe these are the people that really need to receive us. And these are the people that actually we need to better understand, because the richness, and some of the speakers mentioned it yesterday, of the traditional knowledge is quite impressive. It's misunderstood sometimes, but it's quite impressive. There you have also some examples of the training activities that the CIFAL network is doing. The outcome document said and emphasized that the efforts and progress made at the local and subnational levels, and also recognizes the important role that such authorities, local authorities and communities can play in implementing sustainable development. But I want to tell you that do me a favor, raise your hand if you know what is UCLG, United Cities and Local Governments. Please raise your hands. Thank you. This happens to me all the time. And I've been asking this question for maybe 5 years or so. Because of where I'm coming from, I developed some friends. This is like 10 years ago. I'm getting old. At FLAGMA, the Federation of Latin American Cities and Municipalities, when I was in CIFAL Atlanta. We began CIFAL Atlanta in 2003. And then I saw the convergence, the synergies created by these regional groups of municipalities and cities coming together in 2 phases, actually, for the creation of, for the first time in the history of our planet, and I'll put it to that level, the first time, the creation of a global network of cities and municipalities, UCLG. Still a very small organization, still with very limited resources, still with many challenges ahead, but in place for maybe 4 years now, or close to 5. I mention this because one of the problems behind this thing, local governance, one of the problems behind the UN, us, understanding the importance of local governments, local actors, and local communities, and the legitimacy of including them in the decision makings. One of the problems is representation. And now that there is UCLG, and I really invite you to go and check their website or what they do, UCLG, United Cities and Local Governments, you'll understand how this 21st century, again, I believe, is going to turn finally into this century of local governments. Then we won't have the need to include this type of comments in the outcome document of conferences like Rio+20. Let me accelerate. I really wanted to give you examples of what we do in our e-learning courses, in live trainings. I'm not going to read them, but there you have some. This is how we manage our infrastructure area. I won't read it either. I just want you to see where is it that we focus, because I want you to hopefully, as I say, accept our invitation to join us with this level of specificity. Now, we don't do training that is, we do that through forums, but we don't consider that training. It's more awareness raising, and this is a legacy of our previous executive director that just left, Dr. Lopez, who came to made us understand that we need to do this in separate instances. Forums are important, big high-level meetings and so on, the political dialogue and the outcome of it. But the training has to be as what I have in my bag. I mean, right here. Very specific, and I'll keep giving you specifics. This is another example of capacity building tools, planning, monitoring, and evaluation of municipal development. We developed this platform called DevInfo with some partners, and you see there what this course is bringing to them, and then leaving behind with the platform itself. UNOSAT that I mentioned at the beginning, the satellite imagery unit of ours, focuses also, in addition to providing situational analysis for humanitarian intervention and so on, also on GIS, Geographical Information System, critical for the development of local governments. And here, I hope you can see the target audience that we have, you being a very important component of this, all of you, regardless of where you come, but also these two, local governments and local communities, and national governments. And unfortunately, and some of my colleagues tend to think that I do self-criticism too often, but I believe that's a way to improve. Most of us UN agencies focus on this part alone. We really want to be or join pioneer organizations like perhaps UN Habitat and so on in giving local governments the level they deserve. And after that, you see at the center of this, if I can get it, right there, how we want to build capacity through these chapters. And there are some that are not there, that are minor in our approach, but you see, for instance, that we have a fellowship in which whoever working at a municipality or any other type of local government come and focuses on these things in order to become a better decision maker and to increase their skills. The continuing work of CFAL includes supporting the integration of the green economy within three pillars of sustainable development on a practical level. Several challenges remain, including supporting strong governance at local, national, regional, and global level. And this is critical for advancing sustainable development, of course. I won't even read this thing. This is a list that I made out of conversations, dinners and lunches, or traveling together or so, with mayors. For a couple of months, I was asking them sometimes on a napkin or so, tell me, what is a challenge for you? And then writing it down. Tell me, what is the main problem you have? And writing it down. And this is not complete, but somehow perhaps it's a holistic approach. You see how complex this is. And when you work in a national government, which is my own case, and again, self-criticism, I was Vice Minister of Economy and Finance of Ecuador for 2.5 years, and a governor to the World Bank and blah, 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 and the International Monetary Fund. And I regret, but there is one thing that we cannot move back, which is time. And God made it that way, or whoever our creator is, made it that way for a reason. Because I remember that mayors were not just simply not important for us. We were always under pressure with so many challenges, and everything was urgent. And this thing that we understood that was important, that local governments will get access, was a secondary thing. I hope that is changing. But I say this because I believe that national governments need to better understand these key challenges, because at the end of the day, it affects the population that they are supposed to serve, the national governments. Practical examples on how to solve this thing. You're very proud of the partnerships that we have developed with organizations. Titles you are going to see on top. The faces of the people, when you give them these solar lanterns, that's priceless. That has no comparison. The faces of the people, when you bring these things, a wind turbine, and basically we are just a facilitator, identifying a best practice that has an altruistic side, and bringing them to the places where they are needed, and exposing them, and doing the dissemination gatherings and so on through the UN country offices. This is another example. These mini power plants in rural India. This is another example of solar refrigerators. You see, capacity building, let me put it backwards. Building capacity is not just teaching a seminar. And I was in academia for a number of years too, and I used to think that the rigorous academic approach, which is always necessary, will constrain us from doing this thing in the orthodox way. The UN has shown me that I was wrong. This is also building capacity, I believe now, because bringing someone up to the speed of development by showing, as many of you also do, this is the way to go, is also building capacity. And to the point that they become preachers too. So we are very proud of the things that these partners allow us to do. This, I don't have to explain to you the difference between the two pictures, and the difference between that weight and this weight in transporting water. This, with the support of the governments of Senegal and Tanzania, affordable self-sustaining houses, solar and wind incorporated. It's not only in developed nations. The problem, ever present, is that there is not enough. It's not the priority. For very few national governments see this as a priority. Local governments still need a long way to go, unfortunately. The 7 C's that we use to do these things for the successful transfer and uptake of environmental sound technologies: context, challenges, choice, certainty, communication, capacity, and commitment. I don't need to explain all of them. To master them, to understand them, to make sure that you have included them in the analysis, but I do mention capacity, which is where UNITAR works. That all stakeholders must have the necessary skills to perform their roles. And all stakeholders include not only government officials. And this is one of the shortcomings of ours, that we need to go beyond government officials, but after all, we are a UN agency. An example of technology transfers as key element in addressing climate change. You see what the IPCC says. The efforts to face climate change will require technological innovation and the rapid and widespread transfer and implementation of technologies, including know-how. I stop there. Know-how. There you see how this thing is very ethereal, very perhaps misunderstood here and here. It's a competition, and this was a question yesterday, how is it that you ensure that national governments and the global multilateral system understand that the local governments are at the center of the environmental challenges that we have? It hasn't happened yet. We have been following this index that some of you, I'm sure, know, especially the one in Asia. The NASDAQ OMX Green Economy Index and the sectoral indexes. Quite interesting. I wanted to invite you to follow them so as to see the interaction between the national and the local level on all these topics. And I won't take long. We work very closely, of course, finally, we work very closely with other UN agencies since Secretary General Ban Ki-moon made a priority to have one UN. We used to have 20-some UNs, which doesn't make sense at all. After the failed attempts of Secretary General Kofi Annan for UN reform, at least we understood our lesson, and we are trying to create these synergies. UNIDO and UNCTAD are at the center of our cooperation, UNEP, of course, and I just wanted to show you our understanding emanated from them of what green industry is, the policy measures you need, and the government strategy behind it. I won't focus on this thing of how to do technology transfer, but I will mention this, that the technology transfer models, this is one of the most used from Hogman that I'm sure some of you know. We believe is evolving rapidly. It's just too cumbersome. And the typical example that I'm sure you have heard, which is that there is a quantum leap in a person that never had access to a telephone in Africa or Latin America or the Caribbean or whatever. A landline telephone, as we had decades ago, or our parents, perhaps. The quantum leap that happens when this person gets a cell phone for the first time and adopts the technology, and 6 months later he's an expert on how to use ICTs, right? So it should be easier than this. This is what I want to say. And we, on environmental challenges, we put this at the center because this is just too cumbersome. Now, let me finish the unitary part. Thank you for your stamina and for enduring me. And now let me just go to some reasoning, late night reasoning that I was doing. What is the difference between 1648 and 2012? There are many things that you can argue, but you have to go or include among them that the Treaties of Westphalia, the birth, the origin of the nation state, 1648, you all remember this thing. You can actually teach me about it. But for me it's very important because the nation state and the issues of sovereignty, as we understand them, are disappearing rapidly. And Europe is the perfect example. The borders being imaginary lines, the free flow of goods, people, and so on, capitals perhaps, with limitations, with challenges, of course, with political shortcomings, yes, but there is a humongous difference between what the world was in 1648 and what the world is today. And among these differences, local governments are at the center. Again and again, what I try to tell you is that anything that we will see on environmental studies, environmental planning, environmental solutions, and so on, needs to take this into consideration, and I don't think we are doing it the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. What I propose, because time is running, could be great if maybe Elena Proden could come right now and her speech follow yours, so we have a
Yes.
all set of questions for the two interventions. That's okay?
Elena,
That's fine.
all yours.
So it's up to you. So it's up to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My colleague just explained to you a little bit about what UNITAR is doing in the area of capacity development, as well as on the promotion of sustainable development and our work at the local governance level. My presentation will be more of a follow-up to the initiative that UNITAR has launched this year. We organized a high-level panel together with the Ethos Institute, a Brazilian corporate social responsibility arm, the day after the Rio+20 conference ended. And this high-level panel focused on the following question: are we on track for a 21st century social contract? So I would like to structure my presentation in two parts. In the first part, I will discuss the problems of the development agenda in general, as well as the major trends that will have an important impact on global governance and international governance. And in the second part, I will focus more specifically on the social contract idea, on the new social contract idea. So let me first of all start with briefly mentioning the post-2015 development agenda, the definition of the development agenda process. As we approach the deadline for the MDGs, that will be in 2015, there is already a reflection ongoing within the UN system on the future of the development agenda. The Secretary General designated a high-level panel on the post-2015 agenda, and that is composed of the representatives of government, civil society, and private sector. And he also appointed a special advisor for the post-2015 development planning. And there is a series of consultations that they've already launched at national and regional levels with a variety of stakeholders, starting from governments to again, civil society and private sector, to reflect on how it should look like. And at the same time, this panel has already produced a preliminary document reflection, some first reflections on what should be at the core of the future development agenda. And sustainable development is certainly the defining concept in this respect. At the same time, there was a recognition that, on the one hand, we should build on the strengths of the MDGs, since the MDGs is really quite often cited as probably one of the most, if not the most important contribution of the UN to development. On the other hand, we should also do our lessons learned part, and also, for example, the new development agenda should have a universal applicability and not only be limited to the developing world, for example. Or other lessons learned include the need to account for the local context, and when measuring a progress, the progress should be measured also relative to the starting point that is different for different countries within the developing world. So basically, it's about the MDGs. On the other hand, obviously, there is a recognition that there should be a thorough articulation between the Rio+20 results including one of the most important ones. It's the agreement to adopt a set of the Sustainable Development Goals. At the same time, the ambition and the task of the high-level panel is to help the Secretary General to propose certain ideas and vision for the member states, because in the end it will be a member states-led process, and it will be member states who will negotiate the 2015 development agenda, a post-2015 development agenda. I'm not going to discuss in detail the Rio+20 conference, as I'm sure you are well aware of the major problems as well as the agreements achieved during this conference. I would rather focus on the major trends that start or are already defining and or will define in the future the multilateral processes, as well as the future, the development of global normative frameworks and governance systems. One of the major trends that everyone is talking about is obviously the rise of the South. There are many facets to the rise of the South. On the one hand, it's the growing demographic weight. Currently, Asia is already accounting, Asian population is about 4 billion. African has reached 1 billion last year and exceeded 1 billion last year. And 600,000 people are living in Latin America. Basically, more than 5.5 billion people are living in the developing world. In 2015, according to the current projections, Asian population will reach 5 billion, African will double, or it will reach 2 billion people. And the Latin American population will also grow, even though not at such fast pace. Africa will be, already it's the youngest continent, and it will be the fastest growing continent from the demographic point of view. Such countries as Nigeria and Tanzania their population will become bigger than many of the current big emerging economies. On the other hand, there is obviously a shift in the economic and financial power, and the economic as well as the shift in the production and consumption poles. And related to that phenomena there is another important phenomena that is being currently discussed. It's the weight and the importance of the growing middle class in the developing world, and particularly in Asia. China's middle class is already more than 150 million, and it's already the second biggest in the world. And India is quickly catching up. There is also an ongoing reflection on how the new middle class in the emerging economies and in the developing world is going to impact the consumption and production patterns in the world economy, as well as define the future of the global society. On the other hand, with the demographic and economic power shift, we are witnessing the lack of similar shift in multilateral fora. The voting quotas, for example, of the emerging economies in the international financial institutions have been revised, but only slightly, and they still do not reflect the relative economic weight as it's being measured in currently used economic indicators in the governance systems of these of the international financial institutions. Security Council reform is a long-pending issue. There is obviously the emergence of the G20, as a potential forum, but it doesn't have the same level of legitimacy ensured by the United Nations universal membership. At the same time, the countries of the South have realized that their collective bargaining power is more important, so they increasingly cooperate and form negotiating coalitions and alliances in multilateral negotiations, be it on trade, climate change, or sustainable development issues. Finally, there is another facet to the growing importance of the South. It's the importance of the emerging economies as new players in the international development cooperation. New players, it's because quite often they are different from traditional donors. They use different methods and approaches. And they actually do not qualify their cooperation as development assistance. They are rather speaking about cooperation per se. They use new tools and quite often combine economic cooperation agreements, profit-oriented agreements, with technical assistance, big infrastructure projects, and preferential loans. Their part in the international development cooperation is still relatively small, but it's growing very fast. With the rise of the South, that is being recognized as one of the major trends, there are other trends that are equally important, but probably are less discussed still. One of them is, for example, it's the importance of the increased access to education in the developing world. Global literacy rates grew by more than 10% over the last 20 years. And in 2010, global literacy rate was 84%. And it's expected to reach 90% by 2030. This enhanced access to education and to information and knowledge is further improved with the spread of new information and communication technologies. Currently, 28% of the world population have access to internet, and around 40% of these 28% of the world's population are situated in Asia. At the same time, many observers recognize, many scholars recognize that developing world is using internet in a quite often in more creative ways. One interesting example is obviously the flourishing of the mobile telephony in Africa, where quite often mobile phones help to solve problems related to the weak infrastructure and lack of access to electricity. One of the interesting examples is the flourishing of m-banking. In Kenya, the so-called M-Pesa, it's the electronic payment system that combines mobile technology with to provide banking services, including to people with quite low incomes, has become a very important tool that empowers population. For example, in 2010, M-Pesa had 12 million clients in Kenya, or 31% of the Kenyan population, and half of the transfers that reached 17% of GDP were less than $10 in size. On the other hand, the spread of new information and communication technologies has also affected production processes and enlarged the digital or non-material part in the economy. It has also contributed to an exponential growth in opportunities for communication and information sharing between people. So basically, we are living now in what is being called the age of big data, and such terminologies, collaborative thinking, cloud computing, etc., they are more and more present in our everyday language. We are also witnessing new forms of social interaction across space and traditional social divides. The capacity, it is important to note that there is now a capacity for people to capture and instantly transmit information and digital data, as well as to easily store and search it. All these new developments in their turn redefine knowledge production systems and create new ages for social science research. We are speaking about collaborative thinking and democratization of research in this respect. As a result, the very concept of citizenship is being redefined as we enter the era of increasingly interconnected and knowledge-based societies. There are new forms of expression and enhanced and more powerful new forms of expression of new forums for expression of opinions and new powerful ways for promoting civil mobilization. The examples include obviously citizen journalism or blogging that has become a new space for criticism and civil mobilization. We all know about the importance of the social media in the Arab awakening. Another important example, probably less well known, but that is growing in scale, it's virtual protests, or so-called the spread of .orgs, such as Move On, Get Up, Avas, etc. They mobilize millions of people for virtual protests and petitions by using very powerful marketing tools. Some see this as the age of a new social activism that is going to actually replace the physical rallies. Some of the interesting examples of the use of these virtual protests include the collection of 1 million of signatures on an electronic petition and the donation of important funds for the anti-regime protests in Burma. Another interesting example is the example of how, through the virtual protests, Avas tried to mobilize population against the law that was being discussed in Uganda related to the gay rights and gay population. So basically, the combination of this enhanced access to education as well as to new information and communication channels make citizens ever more interconnected, and they become, what is interesting is that they become increasingly aware of the global nature of the current challenges. And there is an expansion of dialogue at a global scale between citizens in different parts of the world on the challenges that they share, and they realize there is a growing realization that challenges are similar and global solutions can be found. So there is a need for mobilization. Another example related to the spread of technologies and how it's impacting the concept and the notion of being a citizen comes from the so-called crowdsourcing. Alex mentioned that at UNITAR we have a program that is called UNOSAT. That is working on the interpretation of satellite imagery. One of the interesting partnerships that they have, it's Citizen Cyber Science Laboratory or Center. It's a partnership with the European Center on Nuclear Research and the University of Geneva, in which they are using the collaborative power, that is to say the the power of volunteers to try to respond in a much faster way to some of the development challenges, or to some of the even in humanitarian crisis situations. One of the examples of their work include, for example, using the support of volunteers for geotagging of the web images of damaged buildings in Libya during the conflict last year. The other examples include the projects that are called Africa at Home and Asia at Home, whereas UNOSAT staff is training scientists in Africa and Asia to use internet technology and volunteer support to respond to some of the most important development challenges related to public health, for example. Finally, another important development related to the that will impact the global governance structures. It's the multiplication of different actors, local, regional, as well as civil society, private actors, who become more and more engaged in various international processes. And what was interesting about the Rio+20, though the conference is quite often criticized for the lack of concrete commitments or concrete results, one of the interesting things about the conference was the mobilization of these new or existing actors, but the scale of mobilization that was very encouraging. That actually there is a growing understanding among the citizens at large about the importance of sustainable development. So all these trends will affect governance systems and will contribute, they are already contributing to the delocalization and deverticalization of power. They create both new important opportunities but also challenges. When we are talking about opportunities, it's the flourishment of participatory processes, of course. For example, the disenchanted youth that is also very much affected by unemployment crisis, but at the same time perfectly masters the use of new technologies, have new ways of communicating their opinions and new ways of engaging on local, national and global challenges. At the same time, the spread of new technologies creates new challenges, such as the problem of digital divide, for example. If it's not being, the development community, the international community has an important role to play in this area. At the same time, there is a number of structural problems that will need to be addressed. I've discussed the major trends that are going to impact the global governance and global normative frameworks, as well as the international cooperation. And perhaps two of the major problems that, on which there is a growing consensus that will need to be addressed in the future are inequalities and how we actually put into practice or implement sustainable development. The inequalities is the theme that was yesterday discussed by Professor Sachs, and it's a very, there is a renewed focus on this problem within the international community. On the one hand, global poverty rates are declining, and if we use a World Bank measure of poverty, that is to say the population living on less than $2 a day, global poverty rates, global poverty rates have declined from 75% to 33% over the last 30 years. At the same time, we are also witnessing the change in geography of poverty, because contrary to the common misconception, most of the world's poor live in middle-income countries and not low-income countries as in the past. Currently, actually, 72% of the world's poor live in middle-income countries. This is obviously due to the emancipation of some of the formerly low-income countries into the middle-income country strengths because of the quickly growing GDP in these economies. At the same time, there is a need for a renewed focus on the problems of the poor people as such, and perhaps less from the point of view of the poor countries' perspective. That is not to say, obviously, that it's not necessary to support least developed countries. But the realization of the change in poverty pattern, that actually there are lots of poor who live in middle-income countries, should also bring in new perspectives on how we approach development cooperation. In addition to the change in geography of poverty, there is a problem of growing inequalities. If we speak about international inequalities, that is to say the differences between average GDP per capita between various countries, they have decreased over the past 30 years. This is again due to the rapid economic growth in a number of developing economies. But at the same time, if we try to measure global inequalities in a different way, based on the household service from around the world, and to measure the Gini coefficient, it will show that global inequalities have actually grown. For example, one of the studies showed that Gini coefficient grew from 68.4 in 1988 to 70.7 in 2005. It means that inequalities within some of the important economies, like for example China, have actually increased more than decreased. Moreover, there is obviously the crisis of the dominant economic model as a result of also of the global financial and economic crisis, and the associated neoclassical economic thinking is being increasingly questioned as the main and most important tool for understanding economy and global economy. At the same time, a growing number of countries in developing Asia are promoting a developmentalist state and introduce their own versions of social security programs. In addition to inequalities, another important challenge is how do we actually embrace and implement into practice the concept of sustainable development. What are the measures that are needed at institutional and individual levels to promote integrated approaches for inclusive, socially equitable and sustainable development? And now I will just quickly add a few words on the new social contract idea that UNITAR is also trying to promote. It came about as a result of a conversation that our former executive director, Carlos Lopez, And Professor Sachs had about the tercentenary of the birth of Jean-Jacques Rousseau that is being celebrated this year, that Professor Sachs mentioned yesterday. And the importance of thinking about of a new social contract as part of the sustainability governance. As a result, UNITAR and Ethos Institute organized a high-level panel in Rio the day after the Rio+20 conference, and invited a number of speakers, including two of them were actually here yesterday, Dr. Pachauri, Professor Sachs, as well as the head of UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, Achim Steiner, and former UNITAR's executive director, Carlos Lopez himself, who is currently the executive secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa. It was a very interesting discussion. Professor Sachs shared with you yesterday his insight about the importance of a mega-planetary social contract through the UN and the importance of food and security, energy security pillars in this contract. Rajendra Pachauri spoke about the importance of integrating science and its insights into policy-making processes. Achim Steiner noted that a momentum created for a new social contract during the first Rio summit, the Earth Summit in 1992, was broken, and the conversations of governments and civil society are currently taking place in separate fora and do not meet. And another idea that emerged from this panel that was shared by our former executive director is that basically governments cannot decide anymore on their own, and they need new ways of engaging with citizens. This is something related to what I was discussing earlier. It's the importance of interconnected and knowledge-based societies and the emerging concept of citizenship or global citizenship. When people more and more across space share concerns and realize that quite often global solutions can help resolve local problems. And immediate short-term interests may need to be sacrificed for the purpose of a longer-term vision that would promote a more equitable and beneficial development for everyone in the end. So basically, I will finish my presentation at this point as probably the last thing that, if I may, I'll just quote the last thing that I would like to add. It's that naturally there is an ongoing debate in the discipline of political science about the social contract ideas and the debate between the contractarians and non-contractarians. And one of the interesting arguments I came across about the continued relevance of the contractarian thought is formulated as follows. The ideal of political life as an agreement on fair terms of association between individuals who have a recognized status as free and equal is a moral ideal that has a very deep resonance in modern culture. And it is one that has proved a great inspiration to those who do not enjoy the recognition of that status. So I think probably we should look for an inspiration from the Enlightenment philosophers to solve current problems of inequalities and to promote participatory governance. In the new age, in the new type of society that is characterized by never growing interconnection between the citizens across the world. To finalize my presentation, There will certainly be questions, but I would most of all like to invite you to contribute your thinking, or to share your own ideas, because we would like, UNITAR would like to promote this initiative, the thinking on the new social contract. What should be the core of this concept, and how it can inspire us to change our mindsets and to promote a more equitable and inclusive development for all. Thank you very much.
Yes, well, I didn't want to hurry you. It was just that since we had a very tight schedule, the idea was that Alex was here before you finished, and then we have a full set of questions on your contributions before listening at Ladislav. So it's open for some questions. I think some colleagues of mine have got a microphone everywhere. So it's up.
Can we switch the thing off?
Can they switch what?
The the projector.
Oh, we don't see you.
It's a pity, you know, I'm so beautiful. It's better like that?
Okay.
Non, il faut éteindre la machin là.
Pourquoi?
Parce qu'on voit mal les gens.
It's all right.
C'est possible de...
Thank you for thinking of us. That's quite all right. It's quite all right.
J'avais bien compris que tu voulais éteindre. Je me dis, pourquoi il veut éteindre?
You're very kind.
C'est pas à cause de toi, c'est à cause de Hélène.
D'accord.
All right. Any questions, please? If I need to turn it off, is which one?
Yes.
These two.
Yes.
So,
Very good.
Alex,
Madam,
I do,
your turn today.
yeah, my turn today. So I do have a question, and I think it's quite practical as well. You were talking about the mandate of UNITAR and how it's important to build capacity, but out of your experience and what you're doing already in the field, what is the main capacity or what is the main skill that you have to develop in developing country? And if you can just like give just one example of the most important capacity that you have to build.
Thank you. Excellent question and very generous addition to this dialogue. If you ask me, I close my eyes because I really need to think and respond rapidly. If you ask me what is the most important capacity, I will have to say vision. And normally we don't, I will concede this thing, normally we don't include vision as part of capacity. We have vision and capacity. Vision leading skills that transform societies and so on. But I include this in a fashion that has been shown to me by people in really dear critical need of capacity, and I gave the example briefly of Afghans and Iraqis. When you engage with these people, I remember my times as a university professor with my students, quite a privilege for me and so on, the transformation that you expect to get from them, but a rather limited relationship in which, I say this with respect, assuming that we all, as academicians at a point in time, did our job in a thorough way, limited relation in which it was up to the student to actually acquire the knowledge that you wanted to share within a framework, the academic framework, a university, and so on. In Afghanistan and Iraq, what I see is people that really look at you or the instructor that comes as saying, this guy is really teaching me something that is going to save my life, the future of my nation, something very, very personal, very critical and very urgent. This vision comes because, if I tell you in a parenthesis, it's not enough to go into these countries just saying, this is the A, B's, and C's that you need to know. You need to do that on a wider base, trying to convey this message of we want to walk with you hand in hand, but you have to be you to develop and casting this vision, and you will need these skills. People ask us, and I finish the comment with this, people ask us, why is it that you are teaching public policy and communication skills? Why is it that you are teaching public finance and conflict resolution? What's the linkage between the two? Is exactly what I'm telling you. Is that these people need, we believe these people need these skills to cast a vision, to implement it, and to go wherever they want to go. So, complicated answer, but this is how I see it. Thank you for the question.
If I can also propose a complement also your answer. One of the areas that, one of the projects, important projects that Alex mentioned today, it's CCLearn. It's an interagency platform that is the secretariat is being hosted by UNITAR. And what is important about the concept of the CCLearn is the idea of institutional capacity development. Basically, the idea is to help strengthen national training institutions so that they would work for the development of individual skills and capacities within countries. So that's one of the new ways. It's not entirely new, but let's say in the area of climate change, for example, for us it's a very exciting project, and I think there is a certain vision to it that there is an interest in other programs about the possibility of replicating similar vision in other areas. Not only environmental, let's say, for example, it can be migration, etc. On the one hand, it promotes, there are two important components to it. On the one hand, it promotes a one UN approach, because we bring together different UN agencies working from different perspectives on the same problem. And on the other hand, we help to strengthen national institutions. So it's a long-term investment in the future.
It does, and I would like to add to what Elena just said with showing you what's on the screen now. As part of Rio+20, where UNITAR was very active for obvious reasons, we developed this Green Dreams campaign. Because, you know, we keep talking and teaching and asking and writing about real democratic approaches in which the participation of people is at the center of it all. Yesterday we talked about planning as part of the environmental vision that we have for the future, and how planning must be democratic. How do you do that? We developed this, there could be many ideas, but this is a limited one, but I believe a good one, for the local communities. We developed these Green Dreams Around the World campaign, which is basically a 1-minute message recorded on whatever smartphone sent to this particular platform, and then the compilation of all of them. This is just the Brazilian website. We had really many, but this is the most active, maybe because Rio+20 was in Brazil, but it was quite impressive to see that people were telling mayors, councillors, or whoever, this is what I believe should happen. In my neighborhood, in this corner, where people are trashing X. So, or this with public transit, or this with the election actually, and so on. So the Green Dreams campaign, anything related to the environment, deliver a message to the whole of the ministerial meetings at Rio+20. This is something that I really needed to mention, which is rather unique, complementing also what I was saying at the beginning, this vision that we would like to encourage. Thank you.
And at the same time, this is something that I was talking about. It's how the new technologies actually also help us mobilize, not only mobilize people, but provide opportunities for them and have space for them to be able for their ideas, their vision to be integrated into the planning and decision-making processes.
Thank you.
I have a very practical question.
Please.
You insist, your main argument is about local governance, and you say that your most important partner for UNITAR session are local collectivities. And I perfectly agree with the idea, and I think it's very interesting. But there is a practical problem because there are many, many local collectivities.
Yes.
And my question is, how do you, when you organize a session, how do you select these collectivities? What is your choice, and do you try to find people who can have an influence on others in the future? I don't see how you proceed for that, for doing that.
Thank you. And the actual answer, I always remember someone in my family that says, oh, which one of the two answers you want? And you say, how two answers? There should be just one. And you say, no. I can tell you the one that I can say in public and the one that I can say in private. I'll tell you both now. The public answer is that, of course, it's an open invitation. It's on the website. Anyone that have some stake, you see, not only an elected official, but whoever who's part of a community that really should be included in this thing is accepted. And we don't charge for these things. Very rare occasions we charge for something on a recovery cost basis. So this is the public answer. The private one is that I actually believe that it's almost impossible to ensure that everyone has access to this thing. It's the practicality of it. You properly say that. How do you ensure that in this community, this person who's a catalyzer, the person that can galvanize, if I can use that word, everyone else who say, this is what we need, and we need to build these skills, and we need to do this planning, and we need to solve this environmental challenge. How can we identify first this person and then motivate this person to come? It's practically impossible. I recognize that. I'll give you an example. We work at the local government, as I say, through these federations or associations of municipalities. Very limited, because they are at the center of local governance, but not the main actor on local governance. So the private question is that is rather complicated. Thank you.
Merci. Je pensais que vous alliez parler. I'd like to make just a comment. We had a discussion with Carlos Lopez in Brazil, and he was on Brazil. And we made an overall research on local development issues and where it hurts, let's say. How do you open the gates for local development? And I asked him on what was the key difficulty. And he said, the key difficulty is organizing demand for all these policies. So actually it is the reception point, because we discuss so much what is the seed, how much money we put, what are the projects and all this. And actually the key issue is the terrain, the reception capacity. We were discussing this yesterday concerning Morocco and the difficulties of the Champagne region, which has an agreement with the Moroccan region, and they want to make different projects. And who is your counterpart there? So this actually we've been destroying communities, destroying this capacity of people taking care of their own lives. And now we come from policies from above, and it's difficult to really make this reception. It's just to comment. The result of the study, we worked over 400 people during 1 year and a half, drawing up a general policy for local development. It's on my website. Well, I'll be commenting on this, but basically, it's called a national policy of local development support. The national policy of local development support. It is quite interesting. We made 89 key suggestions on how make this work. And this was a part of this, of Carlos Lopez's contribution to this. I think we have a key issue here. However large, ample the policies are, they must come to the earth in some place. And the local policy issue, I think, is quite central on this. Thank you.
If I may give you two very short comments. The first one is my admiration to you. I know now more about your work in Brazil, how respected you are, and especially your website. Quite an interesting website and very high quality of the content. And the second comment is very rapidly something that I see as a fallacy at the center of the problem, which is that national government authorities fail to understand that the distance with the actual stakeholder, the beneficiary, the ulterior reason of why a government exists is closer with the local authority. The mayor go to the street, or the council member, or the government official working in that city or town, and actually see the faces of these people and receive the messages, good or bad. The minister, the deputy minister, the undersecretaries, the director generals in the capital, they can afford, unfortunately, the luxury of detaching from the actual beneficiary of their efforts. So you are absolutely right. It is at the center of the problem. Professor Mancebo, thank you so much.
Hi, thank you. Thank you both. Okay, so just a word for the end, you know. I remember I was hearing you and listening to you, and talk about the sentence, favorite sentence of Rajendra Pachauri, be the change you want to see. So I think that's some of what you do. And I'm very happy that we're going to become partners in the next encounters with the theory of Pachauri too, and along the way with some programs. It's very good news for us. I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.